Hi, I'm Joe Lewkowicz with Coldwell Banker Realty, and this is our monthly live stream where I'm going to answer a bunch of questions regarding the real estate market in Tampa. Specifically, I work Northwest Tampa, and just to give you an overview of what's happening in the Northwest Hillsborough, Northwest Tampa area, the market is coming into springtime. We're mid-February at this point, and March is really the start of the summer selling season for people wanting to mostly get settled by the time school starts. I've got a lot of people coming in looking at relocating here. They've been transferred or they're thinking of taking a transfer. And this is kind of the time where people start their buying trips. They go look at schools, they go look at areas, they go look at traffic. They may or may not have the ability to decide if they're moving here. If they are deciding they're moving here, they want to get their kids settled by June or July. Usually many of the places they're coming from, schools end in June, and they want to get settled. They want to get into the best school system that they possibly can. And that's a lot of things that people think about. What schools? High school, middle school, elementary school, where are they going to be? Private schools, they're talking about that. So now we're into the heart of the season, coming really into the heart of the season. By the time you guys see this, we'll be into the really first beginning of the whole market. Market's going to go all the way from now through the end of July, mid-August. Once school starts, our market will start to slow up. So if you've been thinking about selling or even thinking about buying, the interest rates are still pretty good. The Fed did not raise rates. Matter of fact, they came out saying they're going to hold them steady, and that was a little bit of a surprise. The economy is doing pretty good. It's up, it's down, it's a little bit volatile. So that all kind of factors into the market. But now is the time, if you're thinking of selling, to really focus on putting your house on the market, getting it ready for the middle of March, beginning of April. That to me is the best time to start putting your house for sale. It's going to sell for more money in less time at that time of year than any other time. So with that, I'm going to get right into questions that may have been coming through. This is what I do every month, answer questions that people have written in or want to know about. And not just this time of year, feel free to email me. This goes out on my website, so I'm happy to answer any questions at any point in time. So let's see if we can get started with any of the first questions that may be coming in. Okay, so how should I start preparing my home if I'm selling it in the summer? Great question. I just had somebody else today. How much money should they put in? What are the things that they really need to do? What things give them the biggest bang for the buck? So, number one, if you're thinking of putting a kitchen in right now and you wanted to have your house up for sale this summer, don't do it. Okay, and the reason I say that, it's expensive. It's going to take you more time. It's liable to take 2 or 3 or 4 months. By the time you make the picks, you do everything. Just put the house up for sale and don't worry about that. The biggest bang for the buck that you're going to get is paint. Paint colors, fresh paint, usually a 1-for-1 unless you've had your house painted recently. Go to what the latest colors are, and we can help you with that. I work with a couple decorators, a couple stagers that can help you get set for that. What else should you spend money on? And that's kind of a judgment call. Fix up your landscaping. Mulch is cheap for the bang for the buck. A couple of yard things. Should you spend thousands of dollars if you haven't already? Maybe, maybe not. Sometimes I'm recommending that you sell the house in exactly its as-is condition because it's good enough, but you're not going to get as much as somebody who's done bathrooms, kitchens, just resurfaced their pool, just put new pool pavers down, just completely resodded their yard. If you haven't done that, you're not going to get that kind of money. If you have done that, you're going to maximize what you've got, and that's the kind of things that we can talk about. So let's see if another question. Should I price my house higher to leave room for negotiations? And everybody selling asks this same question. Now, how much higher should you be? There's a couple philosophies on this, and Sometimes in some other states, especially, it's a little more prevalent. People price their house way lower than the market. Say, for example, a house is worth $400,000. They put it at $300,000. They get a bidding war, and within 2 weeks, their idea is that they're selling it for $425,000, $450,000 because they've gotten multiple offers in. So it's kind of not completely an auction, but along those lines. That I don't necessarily recommend, but it has worked for other people before. I found that in the $200,000 to $400,000 price range in Northwest Tampa, the median negotiation for houses from their final list price, not the beginning list price, final list price, runs at right about 3%. So in other words, $400,000 house, the median negotiation is $12,000. So in other words, you're selling it for $388,000. That means if you price that house and you think I've got to build in a little fudge factor, and the problem is building in a little fudge factor usually works out from not $25,000, you're going, house is really worth $4,000. You're pricing it at $450,000 or $435,000, you're going to be lowering that price before it sells at what the true market value is, which might be $388,000 to $400,000. And that's the problem, pricing it too high to begin with. Generally, what I tell people, most buyers know what they can afford. If they're a true buyer, they've already talked to a mortgage company. They've already been pre-qualified. They already know. They've followed on Zillow. They've followed on Realtor.com. They've been on all the websites. They know what's out there. They have some idea what the market is. One of the things that they don't know is the biggest question they ask, what's wrong with this house? Why has it been on the market for 4 months? And actually, I had somebody ask me, why has this house been on the market for 3 weeks? That was a question I asked several months ago, and I'm going, 3 weeks? That's like no time at all. And I said, partly it's time of year. We get to March, April, May, June, July. If your house sits on the market for 60, 90 days, people are going to start asking that question. So don't plug in much more than 2, 3, 4% in negotiating amount. That would be my best recommendation. Let's see if there's another question. What is a homeowners association? Okay, that's, if you've never owned a home, this is one of the first questions that come up. Homeowners associations can vary from where they have very strict rules to they don't have hardly any rules at all. Most areas are what we call deed restricted. Okay, that means there are certain rules that have to be followed. The homeowners associations are the ones that enforce those deed restrictions. Now, sometimes they have a mandatory fee and sometimes they don't. For example, Northdale, which is a large community of about 2,000 homes off of Dale Mabry, has a voluntary homeowners association. Now, there is money collected in their tax rolls to pay for the lighting district and all that, but otherwise, they have an association, they have deed restrictions, but they're really not as well enforced as other areas. Then you get to very strict places. You take the high end of Avila. Avila is gated, security guard, very high deed restrictions, association fee, running in more than a couple $1,000s a year. Other places have a mix of what's called a community development district and a homeowners association. Those are policed very strongly, like Cheval has that, West Chase has that, where you have certain of the facilities are maintained from the community development district funds, some are maintained from the homeowners association, but the whole thing is policed by the homeowners association. Mailbox size can go into that, mailbox design. Is your house got to be pressure washed? Is your roof got to be clean? All this can be taken care of and controlled by the homeowners association. And sometimes local people run the HOA, meaning it might be somebody who lives in the neighborhood, and many of them are run by professional homeowners association organizations, property management groups that they hire out. So let's see if there's another question coming over. What is a stratified market? I got to admit, I don't know. Okay, I've seen this. I question, but rarely, not usually talking about residential real estate. So let's see if there's another question. What kind of credit score do I need to buy a home? That's a great question. This is where I encourage everybody to talk to a really qualified mortgage person. I know several, so feel free to email me. I can be happy to give you the names. Generally at 680 and above, you start running into no problems. At 720 and above, you really have no problems. At 680 and below, you're going to have to work on making sure debts are paid off, credit's done on time. You may need to do some credit counseling, and some people, but there's some programs out there that you can get into with, low sixes, even high fives. But that's a lot harder to work with, and that's where you really need a mortgage broker to work with. So let's see if there's another question. What happens if the appraised value comes in too low? Great question, and this is where you really need a great agent, okay, like myself. And I say this because I'm almost always meeting the appraiser at the house. We sell the house, we get the home inspected, then the next thing is the appraisal on the property. Now, everybody selling wants to go up here when the market, past tense, was down here. Why should the appraiser give it that much more money? And that's where I have to do a selling job to one person to make sure that appraisal comes through. And he's got to sell it to the loan underwriters. So here's what happens on an appraisal. Buyer gets a loan. Let's say that a buyer's buying a $500,000 house, but only putting 10% down. Worse, putting 5% down, but let's go with 10% down. That's $50,000. Okay? That house, if it doesn't appraise for $500,000, the bank's not going to give them that loan for $450,000. Okay, let's say it appraised for $475,000. They're only going to give them a loan for roughly $425,000. They're not going to get approved for that loan. You're not going to have a closing. Okay, so what can happen? A, you try and make sure that the appraisal value comes in right because you don't want to hassle with it to begin with. B, you can sell it to them at that lower price, or C, you can negotiate, but the buyer will have to be able to bring enough cash to closing. This is one of the biggest issues that we run into, and this is where you need somebody to sit there with the appraiser, do some schmoozing, and candidly, that's really what you have to do. These appraisers don't want to necessarily come in with a low value. Sometimes they do, but usually they don't have an agenda. They don't work for the buyer, they don't work for the mortgage broker, they don't work for me, and they definitely don't work for the seller. They work for the people lending the money to the buyer. That's their responsibility. They're trying to come up with the best value. If I can help them come up with the right value, that's the best way to do it. Now, if that house does not appraise, let's take this $500,000 house. The buyers were tight on money. All they had was $50,000, and that's it. And it appraised for $475,000, which means they're only going to lend them $425,000. We've got a $25,000 difference. If the seller won't go lower, the buyer doesn't have the money, you end up with no deal. Okay, the buyers do not have to buy it, and that's the problem with the whole thing. Will the appraiser ever change his value? Sometime, I just had one that we sold for $600,000 for cash. It had been sold for a financing right before that. The appraiser appraised it for $450,000. Okay, I had 4 offers: $600,000, $585,000, $575,000, and $600,000 for cash, which finally closed it. Okay, it was a beautiful house. The appraiser came in with $450,000. We weren't going to have a deal, and that guy, we could not get that appraisal changed, even though the buyer wanted to do it. The only way a buyer could go was to go to a new lender. These are the kind of questions that come up a lot. If you have a serious question about an appraisal, if you have a question about how it's handled after you sell the house, okay, or after you go to contract, email me, call me. I'm happy to help you. Let's see what else we got as a question. What tips do you have for people buying a home in Tampa, Florida for the first time? Well, first thing I always say, get pre-approved for a loan. Know what you can afford, okay? So can you afford $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000? Secondly, you are the best person to know what your tastes are and what work for you. I am what I call a great generalist. Okay, I know the real estate market, especially in Northwest Tampa, better than anybody. I sell more than anybody, so I know that market really well. But I don't know what your specific tastes are. Do you want a pool? You don't want a pool. Do you need a fenced-in yard? You don't need a fenced-in yard. Do you like 2 stories? Do you like 1 story? Do you like traditional? Do you like contemporary? Do you like a certain type of floor plan? Do you hate a living room, family room, dining room combination? Do you want a great room? Okay, I can tell you what works for you. I can help you make those decisions as to what works for you. and I can give you a broad general overview of the market, like you ought to be here, you shouldn't be here, how long is it going to take you to get to work, things like that. Okay, but get pre-qualified first, know what you can afford, and then don't really look a whole lot higher than that. In other words, if you can buy a house for, say, $300,000, don't go looking at $400,000, because I said earlier, the median negotiation on this side of town is 3% from the final list price. That's $9,000. You start looking at $400,000, you're going to want a $400,000 house, and you really can't afford it. So stay within your budget, maybe go $20,000 more, if that. But really don't stretch it. You can find what you like within that budget. That's what I've always found. Let's see if we got time for one last question. Don't know if anything else. On the top of your head, what paint colors are trending in 2019 for homes? I am not a great person for that. Okay, I've seen two tones for kitchens. I've seen beiges. I've seen whites. I've seen grays. So this is where I say get with a decorator. One of the issues that I have with the latest colors, they're really good for getting a home sold now. But if you're deciding to stay in your house and you're going to do that, these trends change, okay? Back now, this will date me, but avocado green was the color and harvest gold was the color when I first started in the business. Things are totally different now. But the places, like if you went with, fixtures, especially, are more expensive. Paint colors are one thing, you can change them. Fixtures, I always say try and stay as neutral as you can. Black was really, really popular at one time. Black toilets, black tubs, black sinks. It's really hard to sell those right now. So, but get with a decorator, find out what the latest and greatest is, and that's probably the best that I can help you with right now. So, hey, thanks for joining me on this February live stream. If you have questions in the meantime, feel free to email me, joeluke@me.com. I've got a couple email addresses, but joeluke@me.com. Happy to answer anything. Feel free to give me a call. I'll take the phone myself. So again, my name's Joe Lewkowicz with Coldwell-Banker. Remember that nobody works harder to sell your home.